Park from Recharge Biomedical, and we're doing a webinar today on addictions. After the tragic death of Whitney Houston, I decided to fit this webinar in, and the first slide reminds us that many of our greatest stars have fallen victim to deaths around substance abuse. And I think a common theme would be people having trouble sleeping. So let's get into what causes addictions in general, and then how TA65 might be helpful in treating them. Marilyn Monroe was found with barbiturates and chloral hydrate in her system. Chloral hydrate being the Mickey Finn that people talk about, Slippin' My Mickey, in the old Sam Spade, Philip Marlowe detective stories. And it's a short-acting soporific or sleep-inducing hypnotic agent, and good way to knock people out, and a great plot device for screenwriters throughout the ages. Number 2, Jimi Hendrix, phenomenal guitar player and rock icon. He died what was thought to be from aspiration after being overdosed with barbiturates for sleep. Keith Moon similarly was taking a barbiturate-like substance, which at the time in the UK was commonly used for treating alcohol withdrawal symptoms. Anna Nicole Smith had 11 types of drugs in her system at autopsy, and sadly 4 of them were benzodiazepines, which is like saying I took 4 different kinds of alcohol, vodka, beer, margaritas, port wine. It's all different kinds of alcohol. Perhaps she couldn't get all her benzodiazepines from one doctor and was mixing them from 4 different doctors. And of course, the problems with taking these kind of drugs is you get dependent on them and you need more and more to get the same effect. Also, she had chloral hydrate, which is a short-acting hypnotic. Heath Ledger passed away with 2 opioids for pain relief and also possibly euphoria, and 3 types of benzodiazepines as well. He also had what I would consider the only safe kind of sleep drug, which would be Unisom or any antihistamine, because it's short-acting and does not tend to be habit-forming.
I'm so tired, I haven't slept a wink. I'm so tired, my mind is on the blink. I wonder, should I get up and fix myself a drink? No, I'm so tired, I don't know what to do. I'm so tired, my mind is set on you. I wonder, should I call you? But I know what you will do. You say they're putting you on, but it's no joke. It's doing me harm, you know I can't speak. I can't stop my brain, you know it's 3 weeks. I'm going insane, you know I'll give you everything I've got for a little peace of mind.
Of course, the recent spate of deaths was Michael Jackson, almost 2 years ago, with propofol, which is a very unusual set of circumstances. I think that what happened, he was so anxious about his comeback tour and again providing for all the people who depended on him financially and emotionally. And at the age of 50-something, it was hard. He got injured in his leg, and he was worrying about making ends meet and doing a good show, and so he couldn't get to sleep. And those preoccupations and those anxieties required what's a very potent CNS depressant, or propofol, a general anesthetic commonly used for rapid induction of unconsciousness. And of course, in that time, you're not breathing, you have no urge to breathe, and then he asphyxiated.
All this talk of getting old, it's getting me down, my love, like a cat in the bag, waiting to drown. This time I'm coming down. And I hope you're thinking of me as you lay down by your side. Now the drugs don't work, they just make you worse. But I know I'll see your face again.
Whitney Houston died last week on with Xanax and alcohol in her system. Xanax and alcohol are both CNS depressants, and she may have thought that she was safe partying with that, but it was said that she had spoken to her mother before, taken some alcohol, and then fallen off into unconsciousness in the bathtub. The details of her death really not known. So what do these two pictures indicate? Well, the one on the upper right indicates a bouncing ball, which is meant to say that there's no conservation of ups and downs when you're taking these medications. If you take coffee to go up, you're going to crash afterwards. And so you don't get exactly what you put into the system. If you take a downer, you're going to bounce back up. And so you have to be very careful when you're manipulating your states of arousal. A good example would be a glass of wine before bedtime. It suppresses your glutamine, and then about 2 a.m., the glutamine bounces back, and you're in a situation where you're wide awake. On the lower left, we see a good metaphor for a physician and a patient. The patient saying, "Hey doc, I need to get up to do stuff." Well, of course, you're going to get launched, but there's going to be a comeuppance. You'll have to come back to the ground, and that's of course the quandary that gets into all these celebs and also normal people when they start asking for things, and physicians often become great enablers. We can get into severe trouble. So what exactly is an addiction? Well, the authority on this is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychological Association, and it defines it as when an individual persists in the use of alcohol or other drugs despite problems related to use of the substance, substance dependence may be diagnosed. Compulsive and repetitive use may result in tolerance to the effect of the drug and withdrawal symptoms when use is reduced or stopped. So the key components here would be a compulsion or a need to do it over and over again. Tolerance, meaning it often, not always, requires more of the drug or the fix to get the high. And definitely withdrawal symptoms, meaning discontinuation causes a lot of problems. So when I put together this webinar, I was thinking, what really is an addiction? And some people say, well, I'm addicted to watching The Bachelor, or, I'm addicted to a lot of different things. Well, let's think about what an addiction is. And in my opinion, an addiction is not ego dystonic. So, for example, ego dystonic means you don't consider that a part of who you are and what defines you, and it's upsetting to you. So, if you are going to Starbucks and buying your latte and walking around with a fancy cup of coffee, that feels good to some people. Whereas if you're going to the crack house and scoring a rock of crack, that might not be who you consider yourself to be. People who obsess over certain hobbies, if they don't mind the hobbies, they wouldn't consider them addictions. Secondly, an addiction is not antisocial. Having a sixth of a bottle of Cabernet with friends would be considered quite social, whereas drinking Long Island iced teas on a Tuesday morning would be very antisocial if done so alone in a bar by the docks. Third, addiction is not maladaptive. People who get on the treadmill and run 40 minutes a day are generally thought of as disciplined and healthy and good people. Perhaps somebody like Jim Fixx running too much, it could have been considered an addiction and may have contributed to his death in the 70s. But I think we could all agree that laxative abuse is not adaptive and potentially quite harmful. Finally, it's not an addiction if it's not habituating. If someone likes to scrapbook occasionally, great. But if somebody needs to scrapbook, or let's say you golf once in a while, but if you don't golf, you start having tremors and sweaty palms and unable to function, that obviously is an addiction, which generally does not happen. So also, an addiction requires rehab, and for rehab, we need to admit that there's a problem, and recognition of that, what the problem is, and how it isolates you from other people, and the damage that can cause, emotionally, financially, in terms of your career, your relationships. And once a person who has an addiction realizes they need to be fixed, they can either undergo 12-step programs, cognitive behavioral therapy, meaning trying to retrain the way that they think about things, and pharmacotherapy often plays a component in helping to stave off the anxiety, depression, or even the frank DTs like delirium tremens, for example. Also, things like narcotic abuse can be abated with opioid agonists like methadone. This slide is all we'll get from neuroanatomy. I mean, there's been a lot of study looking at what causes an addiction and the pathways of pleasure and reward centers, and I think it's very complicated, and these are some of the areas which are critically important, such as the nucleus accumbens, the substantia nigra, and then the other nuclei in the brain. Again, you can sort of set up circuitry here and understand it in a mechanistic way, in a circuit way, but other people have looked at it in terms of neurotransmitters, and when we look at that, we know that there are the Prozacs, which are the serotonergic or serotonin reuptake inhibitors, meaning there's more serotonin, more happy drug. The other big the other categories of neurotransmitters would be the opioid receptors, which are responsible not only for pain but also for euphoric symptoms. Also, the endocannabinoid receptor, which is stimulated by THC, the active ingredient in marijuana, which also has sort of a euphoric or mystical quality to it. The GABAergic circuits are usually depressants of the CNS, and glutaminergic mechanisms have to do with long-term habituation reinforcement of certain learning patterns. So the bottom line is it's infinitely complex how we can consider the neurotransmitters and the pathways, but for my mind, people are more of these functional creatures, and so we have to look at sort of how the person experiences their addiction to really understand, even though, of course, the component parts do have to do with pathways and neurotransmitters, and there are genetic predilections as well. As I was thinking about this lecture, I thought about what causes addiction and came up with sort of a functional or behavioral axes of addiction. The first would be trying to control the amount of pain and pleasure we have. So some people get hooked on drugs like Percocet and Vicodin when they're prescribed for short-term or even chronic pain, and some people take alcohol for pain relief, which is obviously not a great idea. Somewhat similar to pain is the idea of pleasure, but pleasure in sort of a hedonistic way. So this could tie into things like stimulants such as cocaine, amphetamines. Also, some people find pleasure in sex or danger, and there's a particularly interesting drug called MDMA, which is popular in the youth culture for the last 20 years, where people are supposed to feel intense ecstasy and intimacy with other people. And so these are ways of controlling our amount of pain and pleasure. Secondly, people use drugs for controlling their level of arousal, such as the need to sleep or the need to be alert. Um, Barbiturates, commonly used for many decades, as well as benzodiazepines of different action durations. The more common short-acting ones would be things like Cerax. The shorter acting, probably the safer. And then there's another class of sleeping pills such as Ambien. A lot of them begin with Z. Those are not any more safe than benzodiazepines and barbiturates, in my opinion. Um, People have increased alertness when they take caffeine, uh, cocaine, things like Provigil, which is a newer drug invented and used by some special forces to be up, as well as maybe fighter pilots. Amphetamines have been used for a long time as up pills for fighter pilots. Um, in addition, people want to control their mood and affect with drugs. Um, Mood being sort of like the seasons. Are you happy in general or sad? Affect being the moment to moment emotions of happiness or sadness. And so the common mood disorders that we know about are anxiety, depression, which are related, and also mania, things like bipolar disease, where people get extremely up. So people control their mood and affect. I didn't make them red or green in this case because they vary, but alcohol, benzodiazepines, one of the most commonly and most difficult to kick addictions would be nicotine, which is both a relaxant and a stimulant. And then people often use carbohydrates or food as a way of treating depression. Of course, the paradoxical problem is the more depressed you are about fat, the more you eat, and the more fat you get. So, not exactly a healthy cycle. And since the invention of Prozac and its related substances, people have been given selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors for depression, sort of as commonly as PEZ, in my opinion, in an attempt to treat existential sadness. But that's kind of the state of affairs we have. Finally, people take drugs on a functional behavioral level to modulate their social uh, happiness, such as peer and family support, financial support. For example, people who are workaholics might be looking for increased social support or recognition. People who are in the performing arts, such as athletes or actors, comedians, musicians, they might find such a high out of performing live that they continue on well past the prime of their careers. Um, Commonly, teenagers or some people use recreational drugs in order to fit in or to have that peer support. And other people, for financial reasons, get addicted to gambling and the excitement or the reward that it might promise. Other people have addictions to shopping and a sort of perverse need to spend money as a reflection of some kind of financial neuroses, shall we say. This next slide is meant to illustrate that sleep is at the key part of a lot of these addictions and a lot of the celebrity deaths. And when we think about what sleep really is, it's kind of like taking the Etch-a-Sketch, the magic Etch-a-Sketch, and shaking it so that all the sand settles off into whiteness. In the top left, somebody has thoughtfully gone and reimagined Salvador Dali's A Persistence of Memory and put a bologna sandwich in there, it looks like, with a cherry on top. Nice touch. One of the more prominent theoretical physicists is shown on the right, But this is what our brain does. It lays down tracks of memories, of meanings, and it needs to be cleaned out at night. So when you're in a chronic state of anxiety, depression, just morbid neurotic preoccupation with the problems of life, we don't sleep well. In addition, if you have sleep disorders, such the most commonly known one being obstructive sleep apnea, people can literally be awoken by asphyxiation, 10, 20 times an hour. How deeply can you go into unconsciousness in that situation? Not very deep. On the bottom left, we see a hypnogram, which is a representation of the brain waves as a person went through their night of sleep. And what's notable here is that in the first 2 cycles, you go to stage 3 or 4 sleep, which is when the brain waves are the slowest and when the body is actually physically paralyzed. And it's my belief that because growth hormone peaks at this time, this is really when the body is physically shutting down and copying a lot of things like nerves and muscles and repairing physically. It's a time of tremendous anabolic or cell growth, and in fact, it's been said that people use about 95% of the same amount of calories while sleeping as they are while awake during the day. So sleep is by no means a waste of time or a passive state. It's a very highly active state. In the latter 2 to 4 cycles of the evening, we spend half the time in REM sleep, which is procedural memory time, meaning, let's say you put down 10,000 new brain cells a night in order to carve in the memories into your mind like an Etch-a-Sketch, people you meet, phone numbers, events. But the dreaming that happens prominently in REM sleep or rapid eye movement sleep is procedural memory. It's when the actual running of the programs of your mind, of the feelings, the thoughts, the worries, the ambitions, the neuroses, all these things in your mental, emotional, spiritual life come together and they're assigned meaning. Perhaps this is one of the reasons why people say don't ever go to bed angry with your spouse, or on the other hand, if you want to solve problems, go to sleep on it, think about it, because there's a lot of things that your conscious and subconscious are able to work out while you're sleeping. And the lower right is a representation. Anybody who's ever worked on their PC computer knows that this is what happens when the memory is fragmented. Let's say you have a file and it's saved a little bit here on the disk and a little bit there on the disk. These red bars indicate that the memory is highly fragmented and hence inefficient to access and slows down your computer. So you can go to a Circuit City and pay the Geek Squad or whoever or Best Buy. There is no Circuit City. You can go to Best Buy and they'll charge you money just to run this silly program, which is part of the Windows operating system. Well, that was made that way because Windows wanted you to have to pay somebody to do that. Of course, the Mac operating system defragments itself. So why do we talk about this in context of sleep? Well, because sleep is really defragmenting as well. It's reordering and it's organizing, and that's why it's so restorative. And at the key of all these deaths by addiction, people are trying to get to that sleep and that restoration, but unfortunately the things that they get in their systems, like the benzodiazepines, the alcohol, the opioids, the Ambiens, it's actually wrecking the ability of the mind to go into this slow wave sleep and then into this rapid eye movement dreaming sleep. And so you don't really get that healthy healing of the mind. Conversely, when people take TA65, they tend to remember strange things from the past, and it's almost as though fragments are being put together, looked at, re-examined, and refiled in a more organized fashion. So one of the common reports is that people dream about things, places, events that they haven't thought about for a long time, and to me that's kind of like a spring cleaning of the mind, which is very good and a positive sign that the TA is working. Other observations from TA patients, meaning telomerase activated patients, in this case TA65 that I've been taking for over 4 years and that I've been prescribing for over 3, My experience is that people have no psychotropic action. I've never had anyone say to me that they felt high or euphoric from it as an immediate side effect of taking it. So the nice benefit of that is there's no compulsion to take it. You can go on a vacation, forget it, doesn't matter. Whereas things even like antibiotics or hypertensive medications, they don't work unless you have a steady level, and they can be counterproductive if not taken on a regular basis. Because there's no psychotropic action, there also is no tolerance to it. So the one capsule is going to have no effect. So likewise, we used to take 12 capsules or its equivalent. Again, no tolerance. And because there is no psychotropic effect, there's no withdrawal. Forgetting to take it, absolutely no effect. As I mentioned before, the sleep improves in terms of its dreaming, but also the restorative quality. So people often report waking up very refreshed. Now, having said that, it's not a soporific. It doesn't put you to sleep per se, but there is an element of conditioning and placebo in that when you're used to getting a good night's sleep, after you take it, I think your body and your mind does anticipate that good sleep. Now, some people in the initial induction, when they first take it, seem to get drowsy, but to me, that's the whole system requesting a shutdown. So, oftentimes, people who take it in the morning will start to take naps in the early afternoon when they've never done so before, or even in the morning. Empirically, one report that's common is about day 4, if the dosing and absorption is adequate, a euphoria can settle in. It's not a euphoria like a high or like a reckless manic episode. It's just you feel calmer and happy for some reason. Cravings lessen for food, caffeine, and alcohol, as will be evidenced later in the testimonials. And again, people just report feeling clear. Very common report is they just don't find that things that used to bother them anymore, which is a very nice side effect. Part of that could be attributed to what I call the upward spiral, meaning people start to feel better, sleep better, exercise, lose weight, look good, be more productive, make more money, and have better relationships. And so the whole thing starts to go up. And that, of course, would be the opposite of the downward spiral, where people get fat and depressed and anxious and don't sleep well. Another nice effect of taking TA is a decreased dependency on SSRIs or Prozac, Zoloft-like drugs for mood stabilization. And for more information, you should look at podcast number 18, which we did on depression. And finally, and most relevant to this talk, would be a decreased reliance on hypnotics or sleeping pills. And for more information on that, please see podcast number 9 on sleep. So we're going to review 4 typical cases, the first being that of a 41-year-old gentleman who gives who used to drink a lot of coffee, and prior to this event where he had about 1,000 people that he was coaching and talking to, he would usually take a bunch of coffee and be burnt out by the end of the weekend. But this story illustrates that he and his team observed he wasn't drinking coffee, he was sleeping well, and didn't get that extreme burnout.
And the game changer was I made the decision to take 4 to 5 during the day.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah, just to see if I noticed a measurable improvement in my ability to perform in front of a crowd of that size.
Oh my God, yeah.
And I can tell you, the difference is, as I told you, I'm not taking any other supplements right now, so I stopped all supplements about 30 days ago. And what I noticed, and the people around me noticed, was just a calm, relaxed, unbelievably focused energy and ability to communicate my message.
Isn't that great? I know. Everyone says that. It's amazing.
Yeah. Not forced, totally easy, very natural, and I just wanted you to know that I'm a big fan, and I think it's just fantastic. It's a fantastic product.
Isn't it amazing? I know. And it happens pretty quickly, doesn't it? Like towards the end of the first week, you just feel calm, right? I mean, Just
And that's big because I'm a coffee drinker by nature, and I've been moving away from coffee, and
oh
I
yeah.
take a lot of supplements to all these things that we need, or at least told that we need to work out.
Nah, you don't need any of that. You just need this stuff because it makes you like high, but there's no euphoria. You know what I mean? It makes you fast, but it's not speedy. It just makes you more of you, right?
That's a great way to describe it because it's not I don't notice a rush or a high
Right.
or no adrenal sort of rush, if you will.
Right.
But the game changer for me was getting to 7 hours of sleep because I'm coming off from
Right.
normally sleeping 4.5 to 5 hours a night.
Right.
I'm getting 7 hours of sleep,
Awesome.
compounded by the TA65, where normally post an event like this, I would just my entire physical body just would
Crash, right?
completely crash.
Yeah, sure, because you're running on, caffeine and jet fumes.
Exactly. And this time it was just,
Beautiful.
okay, I finished the event, had a great day. The event ended on Friday, had a great day Saturday, great day Sunday. I'm back in the office on Monday, and I'm flying.
That's huge. Oh my God, that's great.
Yeah.
Good for you.
So thank you.
The second story reflects a patient of mine who had a long history of heavy alcohol use and abuse, and had never been successful quitting until starting TA65. Now, granted, he had the strength and the discipline to do so, but the physical cravings were a non-issue this time, and he was able to go cold turkey. Now, having said that, I spoke to his son a few weeks ago. He said he was back to drinking, but not in the same quantity and to the same effect. He was drinking socially with friends, never alone, never to excess, and he found that to be somewhat ego dystonic, which brings up an interesting point, is that people sometimes find the addiction to be defining them, and so they define themselves by the addiction as well. So he felt that he was a classic alcoholic. You've heard people say, well, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, or I'm a recovering alcoholic, it's been 50 years since my last drink. It's kind of maybe not so identifiable for a lot of people, but a lot of people do indeed think of it as an ego syntonic, meaning a part of them. They've been told that it's a disease, it's a genetic predilection, it's a curse and an affliction that will never go away. So in this case, our patient Michael had an interesting observation from his son that he found the ability to drink socially and not to excess and not compulsively to be strange.
Now, the alcohol dependency, how much of a problem is that? How much are you drinking?
Well, until I stopped drinking completely about 10 days ago, which is the first time in 7 or 8 years. And
Wow.
getting to that point, I think, has been probably the TA65 help, but also I've been doing a lot of
Biofeedback.
data biofeedback, which is made
Now, would you say that you drank daily?
daily or every other day.
Was it like a few drinks or more?
Well, it varied from 3 to 5 drinks to 10 to 15 drinks.
Wow.
When I started the alpha beta feedback, gradually the amount of alcohol that I would drink at a time has decreased, and my desire for it has decreased. And then getting to the point of actually being able to make the mental decision to stop forever.
Wow. That's huge. And are you doing 12-step?
Oh no, that wouldn't work with my personality.
You wouldn't have the patience for it. Just think it was
Yeah.
kind of BS-y. Hey, that's great. You are to be congratulated, sir. That's very exciting.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, I mean, that's huge. After 7 or 8 years to go cold turkey 10 days ago, huge.
Yeah, well, actually, I've been drinking for 30 years, but
Yeah.
7 or 8 years I went without alcohol for 6 months and then got back on it. So,
Now, were there physical dependency symptoms when you stopped 10 days ago?
no, but I have been supplementing with Ritalin and Provigil, so not every day.
Oh, Provigil. Okay, Ritalin. Okay.
In the case of depression, we discussed in podcast 18 a woman who had had a history of horrible withdrawal symptoms after stopping her SSRI, and also a gentleman who went cold turkey and didn't have the same problems that he had had in the past when stopping. This last anecdote is from a lady, 70 something year old lady, who had been addicted to Ambien for over a year and found it impossible to sleep with or without it, meaning the quality of sleep was so poor it was just maddening. And a friend had noticed that she was highly dysfunctional and recommended, based on his experience, that she try the TA, and within 10 days she was completely off of it for good, sleeping like a baby.
And then I was going off of Ambien also.
So that's huge. Now, you've been on Ambien and it was kind of disruptive to your sleep for a year now.
Over a year.
And you were worried about going cold turkey, but you managed to do that?
What happened was cut my Ambien pills for about the first 4 or 5 days into a quarter. And that would be taking 2.5 milligrams. So I took like 2 nights or 3 nights of that. And then maybe a week ago, I haven't taken an Ambien since.
Now, have you tried to not take it before and had problems?
Never. Yes, I could not. I'd be lying in bed just.
And that was how you met us, because you had taken one and then you were a zombie the next morning.
Well, I'd taken one in the middle of the night because I was lying there because I'd had a cup of coffee or a piece of chocolate.
Yeah.
I cannot have caffeine after 12 noon, any kind. I don't drink caffeine at all. You're in great shape.
You're active. I think there's just a couple things you want to tinker with, but being able to go off Ambien after a year is huge. I mean, look what happened to Michael Jackson, who was so dependent on narcotics to go to sleep.
And let me tell you, when I say this, I'm saying this with all my heart. This is Ambien. This was a half of my Ambien, to the point where I would go to sleep, turn off the light after watching TV or what have you, so I could get relaxed, and I'd lay there for 4 hours without closing my eyes.
Oh, yeah.
So you pop an Ambien because you want to go to sleep.
That's a vicious cycle.
And it's not, I never would dream.
It's not restful sleep, no?
Well, you would, I thought it was, but you know as a doctor, what you've studied, that it's not.
Right.
But I was feeling punchy.
Yeah.
I think it's
Chronic sleep
definitely
deprivation.
affected my thinking process, my memory.
Clearer? Better?
Yeah, but I'm saying I can feel it every day a little better.
Good.
But I think I've been Ambien.
Oh, it clouds you, definitely. Because your brain doesn't get to clean out and reorganize every night. You're just in a zzz.
Now,
It's like watching a TV on blank static all night. So what are the possible mechanisms that could be going on here? Well, first could be sort of energy-based mechanism, meaning a lot of people mention that they feel warm, or they feel energy or healing, or something like that going through their body, which would be likened to the Chinese concept of qi, or the Ayurvedic concept of prana, or the breath of life. Also, mitochondria in animals make energy. These are the little bacteria that were incorporated into our cells in the course of evolution. And in the plants, there would be, of course, the chloroplasts that do the photosynthesis. But these are literally the power plants, and perhaps there's some healing of the mitochondria going on there as well. Interesting, we saw the movie Phantom Menace recently, me and my sons, and George Lucas used a concept called midichlorians, which was obviously a borrowed reference from mitochondria and chloroplasts, to say that Anakin Skywalker, the future Darth Vader, had the highest midichlorian count he'd ever seen. So, indeed, the energy present in our cells may be improving. Second more likely cause would be a cellular stochastic explanation. And what I mean by that is the cells that are good could be overwhelming the bad cells. Stochastics being study of numbers, say in this case, the overwhelmingly healthy and rapidly reproducing cells they outnumber the damaged ones that don't reproduce as efficiently. Thirdly, I believe there's a strong cellular apoptotic component going on, meaning that the cells, and especially the stem cells that are damaged, are not able to kill themselves, which is a primary function of why they exist. I'd refer you to podcast 5 to understand more about that. but think of it like a drawstring in your gym shorts or in your sweatshirt. If the drawstring gets pulled all the way in or halfway in, you can't get the other end to manipulate that string. I believe that what happens with the telomeres is that they are the ends of the chromosomes used to separate every time a cell divides, and when the numbers are not correct, the cell wants to kill itself, but for some reason it can't. So I believe that the ability to activate telomerase and lengthen these telomeres allows the cell to finally undergo the last stages of cell death. And there are plenty of examples of the kind of permanent change that can only be explained by death of damaged stem cells, such as my profound weight loss at about 4 months. Functionally, there might be better neuroanatomical communication, and the little granules of neurotransmitters such as serotonin, norepinephrine, they might be plumper and healthier as the cells get healthier. Also, the receptors that are a big part of that whole dance of the granules being released and detected and acting, the receptors could be regulated better. Another idea that we introduced in the sleep portion of this lecture and go into in podcast 9 would be that your consciousness is getting cleansed, and that helps all levels for you to be healthier and less compulsive and less addicted. And that would probably be facilitated through improved sleep, and again, the defragmenting and the cleaning out of the mind on a nightly basis. Finally, another thing would be a spiritual healing, or kind of a hopefulness, which is commonly borne out in the expression that people use when they're talking to me. They say they're looking forward to playing the best golf they've ever played, or they're looking forward to becoming students in Italy and moving there. Looking forward to having a child at 43, in the case of a patient of mine who became pregnant after many years of infertility. And so there's a relinking of the self. As we get on and become less hopeful, more fragmented and despondent, the self becomes isolated. So when we look at the word origins of religion, it really means to relink, religio, and that's really what we're talking about here, which was something I glossed over in the earlier slide. But in past years, people were addicted to religion, and maybe less so in our secular modern society, but religion really served as the basis for many of these functional behavior axes of addiction, meaning people would get into an ecstatic state by meditating. Some people would flagellate to be in the pain, to experience the passion of Jesus. Arousal, certainly alertness. Some people read the Bible to go to sleep. Other people find it very interesting and stimulating. People find tremendous hope to deal with their depression or angst. And so it's a way of controlling your mood and affect by trusting over to a greater power, and helps with that. And socially, of course, the relinking provided by religion provides a deep connection to other people and to God and to a greater purpose, which was very, very helpful. And religion also, arguably, people who are in religious groups tend to do business with each other, and that could be helpful too. We certainly know people who use the church as a way of enhancing their business and also their social relationships. So can people become addicted to religion? Most certainly. And some people have argued that with the decline of religious nurturing or fulfillment, people have become more addictive in their tendencies with regard to substances and other bad behaviors such as sexual addiction. I want to close with this last quote. It was taken from a gentleman, Mr. Peter Morel, who came up with I want to close with this last slide or two about a Buddhist view of addiction from a website by Peter Morel referenced on the slide. And the reason I bring this up is because oftentimes people who don't have strong addictions don't understand how a person can do these things to get their drug or their fix, how they can alienate their family or leave children abandoned to go score crack or sell their bodies to have heroin. And I think that for those people, perhaps this explanation holds a little bit of wisdom, and it draws an interesting parallel. So here goes. In all addictions, the person has an ambivalent or blurred grasp of cause and effect, of power and powerlessness. They exert power over their habit, but also let and ultimately crave for it to have power over them. To an extent, Buddhists and addicts seem to share some similar perspectives on the world. They both tend to see the transient and fleeting nature of the self and phenomena as being an experience central to their worldview, a view almost utterly obscured to normal people. The self dissolves into nothingness and the world is consumed by their emptiness. By contrast, the addict is not grounded in deep love and compassion for the self and the world, and is not on a path of self-improvement. Their vision is an essentially pessimistic one, while the Buddhist's view is predominantly peaceful, hopeful, and optimistic. The addict's view is also harmful to self and others, while a Buddhist's view is based upon respect and non-harming, love of everything. And though the addict, like the Buddhist, has apprehended the empty and dissolving nature of reality, they do not use that profound insight to construct an inner world of pure forms founded in love and compassion. The addict is essentially leaning on the crutches of their illusions, while the Buddhist leans on nothing, accepts the world just as they are, and gets along on a path of continuous self-improvement. Buddhism can help addicts in several ways. Firstly, it encourages moderation, abstention, and self-control. And secondly, it encourages a sense of self-identity, not based on desires, but upon self-fulfillment and self-respect.
I don't know just where I'm going. Try for the kingdom if I can, 'cause it makes me feel like I'm a man when I put a spike into my vein. And I tell you, things aren't quite the same when I'm rushing on my run, and I feel just like Jesus' son. And I guess that I just don't know, and I guess that I just don't know.
Okay, so we've thrown a lot of things out here. Is there anybody that wants to make a comment or have a question or challenge something? So yeah, when you talk to people, it's really interesting what they say about their sleep. I've heard it a lot. Oh, I dream. And one guy, George, just described it so perfectly. He talked about the fact that his memory went from being like a suction vacuum to one of those Dyson cyclone vacuums. Like everything was immediately accessible in RAM. And I really do think that that's what happens. You're cleaning out the closet, and all these memory fragments come out. They're defragmented and they're put back. So I tell you, it's a very strange thing where people will dream and think about things that they haven't thought about for 40, 50 years. And I don't think that's just biasing them. I think it really happens. And it's just a matter of they don't recognize it unless you say, oh, you might experience this. And when it happens, they go, oh my God, you're right, that did happen. Robert asks about sugar. You know, arguably sugar is an addiction. Carbohydrates shoot up your blood sugar, and there's a certain euphoria from that. And people like the satiation of eating. And certainly a lot of people use food to cope with emotional challenges. So I think food is definitely an addiction for many people. Good question. Oh, Dwayne has a question. Does science know how TA65 influences good health besides increasing telomere length? Some of what I've put in here is speculation based on clinical experience. So I would bet that this is not too far from true. Otherwise, I wouldn't say it. But the monolithic science is going to be very slow to coming to TA, I think. Although, every day I get more and more alerts over my Google about that's something you should do. Send up a Google alert, and every day Google will email you stories about telomeres. Okay. Hi, John. You're on.
Hello. Is this Dr. Ed?
Yeah. Hi, John. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm a drug and alcohol counselor in Mississippi, former high school student, and college teacher, and I've been looking into something called FBJ murine osteosarcoma viral oncogene homolog B, better known as Phosgene B, a protein that usually is found in the nucleus accumbens and builds up and is believed by a Yale study to cause gene expression in the forms of cravings and things like that. Are you familiar with that?
No, I don't know, but I look forward to hearing more about it at some point. So you haven't really used it yourself then in your practice?
No, we're just looking at it. That's all we're doing.
Yeah. I'm very skeptical of magic bullet theories. I don't think that just plaques in one little nerve bundle could cause all of addiction. I think that we are functional creatures with consciousness, and that we create most of our own problems out of that consciousness, and that the machine and the machinery reflects our own dysfunction. Now, that doesn't mean that biochemistry and neuroanatomy don't play a role. They, of course, do. But I think a lot of the states that we have, there is a modicum of free will involved. So, again, a pill for alcoholism for Danny Bonaducci, maybe that's a good thing. I think it's kind of draconian. It's like people who staple their mouth closed or wire them shut so they don't eat. Probably there's a better way. So, just my opinion.
I understand what you're saying, and there are a number of other doctors and scientists that believe that it's very unlikely that there's going to be one answer to cure any kind of an addiction. The thing I always go back to is that so many people say that the only way an addict can be cured is they have to want to be cured first, or
I think
call that reaching rock bottom. But if something doesn't happen at the synapses, if something doesn't trigger the neurotransmitters, the dopamine and all the other things there that have to happen to make you think better, the person can't make their own choice because they don't have the right chemicals in their brain chemistry.
I agree with you. I don't think it's an either or. I think that the conscious mind can influence those neurotransmitters to an extent. But I do believe in what this gentleman, Peter Morrell, said, which is that the addict leans on the crutches of these things, and just on the way out, they lean on the crutches of these pharmacotherapies. Like the 12-step program is a big one, and that walks you through 12 steps of what it means to be this on a path of continuous self-improvement. Some people need the bullet points and the regimen. What we're talking about is taking authorship for your own life, and that's difficult on every level for everyone. I think people have struggles with their addiction to reality. People have a version of reality which is dysfunctional, or a material version of reality which is not helping them on their journey. So I think one of the biggest addictions people have is to the material world, don't you? I mean, this is, again, part of feeding into that, having the drugs, the magic pill, the plaques and the nucleus accumbens. I think at some point people have got to take responsibility for their own agency and say, look, I'm addicted, I need to do something and take ownership there.
Well, there's one thing I teach differently than a lot of drug counselors do, and I try to teach anyone not to say this is my addiction. Because when you say something is yours, that means you own it, and you're going to have it, and you're going to possess it, and you're going to try to keep it. You do not want to say, my addiction. You can say I have a chemical dependency problem, and I'm trying to get rid of it. But don't claim it and possess it so closely to yourself as to say it's mine. I think that's a horrible thing.
Isn't that interesting? I think that's a great point. And that's what that patient with the alcohol. I don't know if you heard that. His son kind of remarked oddly that Dad was upset by the fact that he was able to drink socially, because so much of what his image, his idea was that an alcoholic is this. Once an alcoholic, if he touches your lips, you're back off the wagon, and it's the whole kit and caboodle. So I think you're right. People do get fixed on an image of what they think their disease is, and I think that's as much a trap. You're right. It's a great point. Joyce, okay. Joyce asks, could TA65 help my daughter get off a pain patch, even if she believes she is not addicted? Just having the same pain she always had. Yeah, I think it could. It's worth a try. Again, asymmetric risk. A while back we did a webinar on Parkinson's, and the gal on that had such bad back pain she was taking a fentanyl patch, and that's probably what your daughter is taking. But I think it certainly abated her pain, and as a result helped her to kick. It's very sad, all these drugs that we give out. They're just Band-Aids, but they beget their own problems, don't they? We know we get them hooked on pain pills or sleeping pills, so we take ownership of their addiction. It becomes our addiction. Hey, we got them there. We can't just leave them high and dry, so to speak. So, or not high, dry. Joyce says they tell her daughter she's not addicted because she is not increasing the dosage. Okay, fair enough. Part of the tripod of addiction is not only compulsive, but tolerance and withdrawal. But she's got 2 out of 3, and as Meatloaf said, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. She's got the compulsion and the withdrawal. So yeah, maybe she's not increasing the dosage, so the tolerance is not the issue. But let's see what happens if she takes off the barn. It's not going to be pretty. So it's definitely worth a try, Joyce. That was the point of the 3 anecdotes, and there's many more. I think that the TA65 helps to stabilize the brain and the body, and just gets you in a better direction. And that's why I did this webinar, because Whitney Houston, everyone's talking about dependency.
Now the drugs don't work, they just make you worse, but I don't want to see your face again. 'Cause baby, ooh, if heaven calls, I'm coming too, just like you said. You leave my life, I'm better off dead. But if you wanna show, then just let me know.